So I took 14 GCSEs. I got 7 A stars, 3 A's, 2 B's and 2 C's. I got a C in PE and a C in French. Okay, so in terms of preparation and extracurricular activities that I did, I'll just list off the things that I did, but then I want to say something about what I feel is actually required, because I don't want to give off the impression that the things I did are the things you need to do to get into Cambridge, but I'll get onto that later and touch on that maybe a bit more in the interview section of this video. So I played some sports and was part of the netball, rounders and basketball team at school, which I did mostly for fun, but it's also a nice thing to get to mention on your personal statement. I managed to teach myself how to play a bit of piano, which then gave me really cool opportunities to do like some performances at like school assembly or my school graduation, for example, which again is just a nice one for the personal statement. I took part in some public speaking contests. I won the Jack Petchy regional speaking competition and came third, I think, in the Mayor's Speaking Award. I became a member of the Enfield Youth Parliament, which is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a youth parliament. Lastly, I was able to do an internship via Into Science UK. And I did an internship at the Neuropharmacological Research Lab at UCL with Dr. Anthony Dickinson, which I have to say he was amazing. I'll touch on this a bit more in the personal statement section, but he was so helpful. I really didn't know a lot at all about pharmacology. I knew nothing about pharmacology. I knew very basic things. His research was mostly about pain, and I knew that nothing really. Actually, I knew nothing. I knew nothing. So he was very patient, he was very kind and very helpful, and like I said, I'll touch on it a bit more in the personal statement section, because he actually helped me draft my final personal statement, that was just so nice, because I feel like it's the little extra influence that I needed to just say, okay, I'm happy with what I have now with my personal statement. So what I wanted to say was that you do not need to force yourself to do a huge amount of extracurricular activities, because your application to Cambridge or Oxford will be a very, very, very academic one. To be very straight up with you, they don't care if you can throw a ball through a hoop. They don't really care if you did Duke of Edinburgh and you're independent. They really just want to hear about how interested and how keen you are for the subject that you're making an application for. So my advice would be not to force yourself to go and join a sports team if you don't really enjoy it, just because you feel like it's going to up your chances of getting into Oxford or Cambridge, because it won't. They don't care. Now onto the personal statement. I will show my personal statement on here now. I will try and find a way to link my personal statement to some sort of format where you can see it either in the description box or it will be hyperlinked to the actual image of my personal statement. So like I said, your application to Oxford and Cambridge will be a very academic one, which means your personal statement will be too. They don't really want you to consume a lot of space talking about how you love gardening and running around chasing a ball, unless you have got something to say about the way it impacts your love for your subject or your passion for your subject. Don't worry too much about having to mention all the funky things you've done. If you can, do it briefly. If it consumes too much space, leave it out and replace it with something that is more relevant to your subject. So my tips and tricks for writing I feel weird saying for writing a good personal statement because I don't even know if my personal statement is good. But my tips and tricks for writing a personal statement, I would say, is anything you mention, try and make it relevant to your subject somehow, or keep it very brief, as in 1 sentence brief. And if you feel like you've done something, and if in your mind it's not a great achievement, just make it sound great. For example, in my second paragraph of my personal statement, it says, as the first individual at my school to achieve 400 out of 400 UMS marks in core science GCSE, I realised that through hard work, I'd be able to make an impact in science. I don't know. I think achieving 400 out of 400 UMS marks in core science GCSE is not that big a deal. Probably, I don't know. I found a way to put it in there and making it sound impressive by adding the fact that I was the first person from my school to achieve this mark. I think without that, there would be no point in mentioning it. Okay, so another thing I want to mention about personal statements is to not lie. You can make things sound really impressive, even if that means it sounds exaggerated in your own head, but not to the person who's reading it. Don't lie. Do not say that you've read a book which you haven't read, because the amount of people that I know who've lied about a book they read and then their interviewer ended up being the author of the book is just ridiculous. Just don't lie, because the way they'll catch you, the way they'll just catch you, it's not easy. It's not easy if the author of the book is asking about the book that you said you've read and you've never even opened it to page 5, you know? In my personal statement, I didn't say I read any book, so I guess that means that you don't actually need to be an avid book reader to get into Cambridge. I said that I'd read The New Scientist, which I had. I had been subscribed to The New Scientist for about a year, admittedly for the purpose of being more up to date with current scientific affairs, in the name of getting to say something and mention it on my personal statement. As soon as my interview was done, I haven't opened, let me even show you. I haven't opened a lot of a New Scientist magazine since then, but I did read it for a whole year before the interview. These are unopened magazines because these arrived after my Cambridge interview, at which point I don't need you anymore. You helped me a lot, but I don't need it. As well as your personal statement, you'll hand in an SAQ, which is a supplementary something questionnaire, which is basically where you get to tailor your application slightly more to Cambridge, because they ask you more questions. I don't remember exactly what was in the SAQ, but I think they were standard questions as to why Cambridge, why do you want to study what you want to study, and you get to go into a bit more detail because the personal statement only allows you to express all your thoughts into a finite number of characters, which might not be enough for what Cambridge want to hear from you before they decide whether you are an appropriate candidate to interview. Another tip that I want to give as when it comes to writing a personal statement is to try and give an example of your interest in your subject. So try and give a very specific example of one thing that has blew your mind, for me, for example, in the world of science, or one thing that you found really interesting about, I don't know, whatever subject you're planning on reading, to make it sound like, yeah, this person is actually serious about what they do. They're not playing, you know. For example, I especially enjoy analysing the implications and limitations of research, and I saw potential in an article on natural organ regeneration boosters, EET acids, and felt that through large-scale synthesis of the chemical, it could be used in a healing process, for example, after the removal of cancerous tissues. So at this very moment in 2016, I don't know what the hell EET acids are anymore. Clearly at that time, that was an article in the New Scientist, and EET acids must have blown my mind because I mentioned them in my personal statement. So I don't think they really blew my mind that much. I think I read it, I did think it was interesting, but I also thought, I could probably mention this in my personal statement because it sounds cool. So just something small like that, but I would advise up to your interview to still remember what it is, what you liked about it, the implications and limitations of the article that you're so interested in, just like you said in your personal statement. So to just put an umbrella over what I mean, everything you put in your personal statement, just keep in mind that you can be pulled up on it, and it's just not a case of mentioning it and sounding good and then forgetting about it. If you say something, you will get pulled up on it. So now the part that I feel that has most speculation and most rumors about the interview. So what I did was, as soon as I came out of my interview, I wrote down by hand all the questions I was asked in my interview, just so I could share it with someone who might find the information useful one day. So for Corpus Christi College, I was required to do 2 interviews, one regarding the subject I plan to specialise in, which is chemistry, and one which is more maths based, because if you study any science at Cambridge, you will be doing natural sciences, which is a combination of science subjects until your 3rd year, in which you can specialise. And in your 1st year, you will be made to do maths. So that's where the mathematical interview comes from. I mentioned earlier that Cambridge doesn't really care too much about all the faff you've done that isn't directly related to your subject, and this was especially highlighted in the interview, where I noticed they tried to make small talk for about 5 seconds and then we're like, okay, let's start asking our questions. We share with you some of the real interview questions that I was asked, and I just want to make mention of the fact that you don't need to be one of those people who just have the answer straight away, never get it wrong, and say it right off the bat. The main purpose of the interview is to gain an understanding of how you think, and they want to see your train of thoughts, rather than hear you say all the answers correctly right off the bat. So my tip and advice for the interview stage would be to really share your thoughts, really share your thought process, almost think out loud for the entirety of the interview. And it's also a very nice sort of space filler for if you don't know the answer and you just kind of talk about what you're thinking. It avoids the awkward silence, but also gives them exactly what they want, which is to see how you think about problems you probably haven't encountered yet. One other thing I want to mention is that they will guide you through parts of the interview that they can see you're struggling with. So if you're wrong, they won't just be like, okay, fine, and know in their own mind that you got it wrong. They'll ask you to think again. They'll ask you, think about it like this. They'll ask you, if I give you this piece of information, do you now think you might be able to figure it out? So don't be afraid to get it wrong, and don't think that you need to know every answer off by heart right off the bat. And don't be afraid to think out loud. In fact, do think out loud. For the maths question, they told me, they started off by asking me to draw a given function, which I'd never seen the formula of before, but I just thought, okay, what happens when x is 0? What happens when x goes to infinity? What happens when x goes to negative infinity? Because that's always how I saw my own maths teacher work things out. So I just thought, okay, just do what Mr. Joseph does. Positive infinity, negative infinity, sounds smart, sounds smart. No, I'm joking. Don't try and sound smart. Just genuinely tell them what you're thinking, because you're gonna sound dumb trying to sound smart. Just like I said, really, really, really share your thoughts. Don't give up. Admit if you feel like you are really struggling, because they will help. They won't say, okay, you struggled, well that one's wrong, let's ask you another question and make a fool out of you. They'll hand you a piece of information that might lead you to the answer. They just want to see, can I work with this person? Because these might be the people that will end up being the academics that will teach you during supervisions. So they just want to see, can I make this person think? Is this person willing to stretch beyond an A-level syllabus? Those were my tips, that was my journey, and I really do encourage anyone who even lets the word Oxbridge cross their mind to say, okay, Oxbridge is what I'm going to do, Oxbridge is what I'm going to work for, Oxbridge is what I want, and to make the application. And I wish everyone the best of luck. If you have any questions, because I'm sure I missed out on some part somehow, I'd encourage you to just drop a comment and I'll try and answer the question. If you have any suggestion of what else you want to know or hear or see about the University of Cambridge, to make the suggestion down below, and I'm sure one day in my life I'll get to it. But that's it.